So this is my intention today is to give you a very brief history of Glasgow's water supply, and what the issue the Victorians in Glasgow had in terms of water supply, in terms of public health, waterborne disease, what the solution was, how it was constructed, and ending on where we are today. I do stress that as a very brief insight, because you could really write a book about this. There are books about this actually, but I hope to give some insight as I do manage a team who operate these assets on a daily basis. There's a lovely picture there of Loch Katrine. So how do I page down remotely? Okay, sorry. Okay, so until beginning of the 19th century. Sorry for these sort of wordy slides, but I'll do a sort of brief overview. So in the picture top right there, you can see that picture was taken from, I believe, the 1960s, where there was a old sort of well still in existence in Glasgow. So the main water supply for Glasgow was the River Clyde. So, like in the Victorian days, in most big cities, the rivers were used for various things, sanitation. People actually went down to the shores and bathed in these waters. And as you can see, there was a lot of industry on the Clyde at the time. So the method for extracting some drinking water and water for sanitation from the River Clyde was from official wells. So on the picture top right, you can see one of the old wells. They all had names also. So people would queue up and use whatever vessel they had to extract water from the well. The well was connected to the Clyde via a network of tunnels. So again, not great, but it was a means of taking water from the Clyde.
No, she's.
Are you changing these slides? Sorry?
Just to let you know.
Sorry, what was that?
There's a pigeon just out there.
Okay. Okay, so public health. So just really give an insight into what the sort of public health was at the time. So we had sort of in the early mid 1800s, you had this Glasgow population was growing exponentially. However, the infrastructure couldn't cope with that growth. So then that sort of gave rise to waterborne diseases, typhus, typhoid, cholera, very nasty diseases, waterborne diseases. Also, the housing was all dingy. It wasn't very pleasant to stay in Glasgow. And I'm sure it was similar in other big cities. So very, very nasty living conditions. Susan, you changing this for me because it's not changing. So sorry. Okay, so on the right, I've got a picture of an old tenement close or street. It gives an idea of how close and cramped the conditions were. You see washing as well hanging overhead. Obviously, the bit of Gardaloo going on as well. Human waste being chucked out the windows, etc. So, gave rise to typhus. It's obviously often fatal. I'm not going to go into the sort of detail of these. I'm not an expert on the sort of waterborne diseases, but just to give an indication of the diseases that were going about basically at the time. due to overcrowding, poor sanitation, poor drinking water also.
You ready to change?
Yep. I don't know why it's not changing for me. Sorry, Susan.
I think it's my fault, but if you just say next, I'll change
Okay,
it.
okay, I will do. I will do. So then, I had to find a solution that had the potential of supplying Glasgow with an adequate supply of water. So the challenge was to find a body of water that was big enough, and obviously in the days wasn't didn't have the means to pump water from lower elevation, so I had to right elevation and right amount of water to sustain supply for the people of Glasgow. So Loch Katrine was the best candidate. So Loch Katrine, so huge body of water, also has various tributaries feed into it. You've got the mentioned there. You've got Loch Acre. You've got Glenfinglas. These are smaller reservoirs that feed into Loch Katrine. Loch Venator is Loch Katrine feeds into Loch Venator, and that feeds this sort of salmon. You've got a salmon ladder there that gets maintained with the levels of the loch as well. It's one of our responsibilities there to maintain the sort of flora and fauna downstream of the bodies of water that we use as water supply. So we found Loch Katrine, approximately 10 miles long and the widest point about a mile wide. So quite a significant body of water. Then the next challenge was how do we get this water by gravity to Glasgow? So if you go to the next slide, Susan. So the means, the conduit for the water to go from Loch Katrine to Milngavie was to tunnel through rock, build bridges over ravines. So between 1855 and 1859, the first aqueduct, that's the old aqueduct. So the old aqueduct was designed to carry 50 million gallons of water a day to Glasgow. So in this construction, you've got terms like cut and cover. So that's basically a trench that's excavated. Just bear in mind when it was a trench that's excavated, a base that's formed, walls are formed, and then the roof is then filled in with, covered with clay and soil. So because the Victorians at that time didn't have the means to do a lot of tunnelling, they done a lot of the sort of trench type excavations. So the picture on the right hand side there, so the top picture, that's where the water actually exits Loch Katrine and travels down the old aqueduct as pictured there. So in that structure, you've got a series of coarse screens that screen out any debris, branches, trees, whatever it is that would cause any issues with the water supply. So it starts off there at Royal Cottage, called Royal Cottage because Queen Victoria was there at the opening, and it ends up, the bottom picture ends up at Mugdock and Craigmadie reservoir. So it gravitates from Loch Katrine to Milngavie. It's approximately 26 miles. So can you go to the next slide, Susan? So just some detail on what that infrastructure wasn't just tunnels. So these tunnels had to be so there's two tunnels. So there's the old tunnel and the new tunnel. So these tunnels had to be interconnected, and they have the various washouts, manholes, vents. The vents are called bird cages. So they're basically just sort of chambers that come up to surface level with a sort of curved cage type structure on top, hence the term bird cage. So throughout the sort of construction, there's approximately 80 tunnels. A lot of rock was excavated and blasted through. So, and to do the work itself was an army of 3,000 navvies, and I found out navvies was short for navigators. It makes sense when you hear that term in other applications. And just a note of interest, it must have been due to population or availability of manpower, but the manpower is predominantly from England. So, okay. So go to the next slide, Susan. So this slide gives an indication of the sort of the build. So, and when these aqueducts were started and completed. So the old aqueduct was mid 1800s and completed 1860 thereabouts. As I mentioned previously, mainly cut and cover. So the old aqueduct, when to try and negotiate ravines or valleys, they used the sort of bridge type structure, aqueduct type structure on the right hand side, sort of right hand side top and bottom. So these are, although they're sort of box type structures, they're called tubes. So the tube section, the sort of box section that spans the valley there, that's a more flexible iron. So that's expands and it's built to expand and contract. So so that's wrought iron middle section, and it's cast iron at the sort of ends. They're obviously less flexible. And the picture below is showing a stage in construction. I mentioned cut and cover. So examples of cut and cover are on the bottom left hand side. So that shows, give you an idea of scale. I think one on the right hand side's got a man in it as well. So they have sort of very primitive means of shoring, and health and safety obviously wasn't the biggest priority at that time as well. So it just shows you the effort that was actually made to put these cut and cover tunnels in. And the new aqueduct that was built, as you can see there, so 1885 to 1896. They were sort of a sort of staged sort of construction as well. So the old aqueduct, I apologize, I don't have a map here, but the old aqueduct is, if you look at it in a map, it's not a straight line. It's more, it's not that linear, because they had to choose the sort of path of least resistance, whereas the newer aqueduct is more linear because of more technology then. And these two aqueducts interconnect. So if we have an issue with one of the aqueducts, we can reroute water through the other aqueduct. So just recently we finished a project where the old aqueduct was refurbished in places. So we had to isolate part of the old aqueduct and reroute through the new. So I actually had the opportunity to walk through the old aqueduct, and it's amazing because you can actually smell. It may be imagination, but you can actually smell what appears to be pipe smoke, and the sort of legend has it that that's the sort of remnants of the pipe smoke from the people who constructed the aqueducts. Whether it's true or not, but it's a nice story anyway. So yeah, so we did the refurbishment of the old tunnel. So parts of the tunnels go through the Highland Fault. So the Highland Fault being the sort of geological feature that separates the lowlands from the highlands. So it passes through Loch Lomond. So you can actually see that in the tunnel, where you've got some defects that are visible. So we had to fix these. So that was completed. That is successful. What we've done with the new tunnel as well is that we sent the company from Australia who sent a modified surfboard down the new aqueduct, and the purpose there is to get a LiDAR image, 3D LiDAR image of inside the tunnel, to give us an indication of any collapses, any defects we need to be worried about. So Susan, go to the next slide, please. So again, as mentioned previously, so it gives some sort of detail. So I haven't mentioned Balmore water treatment works yet. So in the last 15 years or so, the aqueduct's been modified and a connection's been taken off it to feed the biggest water treatment works in Scotland. Obviously, the drive there is so that we've got a gravitational supply to feed their work. So that's a huge water treatment works. 4 to 5 million gallons per day. So a big water treatment works, and bit of detail there as well. So the time it takes to go from the pitch on the right hand side to the water treatment works is roughly 10 to 12 hours, and that's all gravity. And the new aqueducts, that supplies water Mulgai water treatment works, and that's 80 million gallons per day. Okay, Susan. Okay, that's the picture of the sluice from Loch Katrine. Yeah, next one. So really to end, I do apologise, this is quite a whistle-stop tour, but it's a very extensive story we could sort of spend quite a few hours talking about. So we've got the Mulgai water treatment works. The picture below shows the old water treatment works. That old water treatment works was in use up until 2007. So where water treatment was purely water coming through Loch Katrine, down the aqueducts. It settled out at the Mugdock and Craigmaddy reservoirs. It then went through a straining well. You see a straining well, it's the structure in front of the small house there. So it's a very, very deep structure, and that there was strainers in that. It's also provided some settlement as well, and then some disinfection then out the door. So 2007, we then commissioned the new works. It's the top photograph. So a lot more modern, as you can see, and that gives the people of Glasgow a fully treated water supply. So one of the big issues with Loch Katrine catchment for years was there's quite a lot of sheep farming. So the sheep farming, and the sheep would sort of defecate over the sort of catchment area and be washed into the water through rainfall and give rise to Cryptosporidium, a pretty nasty bug that can only be physically removed. It can't be removed by chemicals. So one of the main features for the new works was a fully filtered system. So that removes that risk of Cryptosporidium. So in terms of numbers, we've got 310 circa 310,000 properties in Glasgow, and the old works was obviously a lot less than that. I've not got that number here. Okay, can you go to the next slide, Susan? And Balmore. I've not mentioned Balmore much in the presentation. That's more sort of latter years, but it gives an indication of how these aqueducts and Loch Katrine is getting used now. I did mention there was a connection taken off the aqueducts to feed this large water treatment works. So there's actually a hydro scheme there as well. So we have big hydro turbines at that location, which also generate power for us as part of our sort of renewable energy. So again, that was commissioned in year 2000, biggest water treatment in Scotland by quite a big margin, and feeds the east side of Glasgow and outside of Edinburgh, so circa 350,000 properties. What I didn't mention about Milngavie was that Milngavie doesn't only feed Glasgow, it feeds down into North Ayrshire, and in the coming years it will feed down as far to South Ayrshire also. So forever expanding. The reason why we can expand so well is that we have the huge leakage reduction in the last 20 years that allows these works to expand the way they have. So that's pretty much me, Susan, I think. So I do apologise, it's very brief. There's a lot more to Glasgow water supply than what I've actually presented today, but it gives an understanding of, you know, where Glasgow was, what the solution was, and where we are now in terms of water supply.